All right. It is the top of the hour here, 2 o'clock on the East Coast. I think we're ready to get things started. Thank you to everyone for joining today for yet another installment of our FSI webinar series. My name is Josh Kautsky, and today we'll be taking a dive into Healthcare Analytics 101, how to make your data work for you. Today's agenda consists of a few introductions from the FSI side, as well as from our partner in Stoa. We'll be looking at current challenges and how analytics-led decisions fit in. We're going to provide an overview of the CMS Analytics platform, list out a few scenarios, conduct a live CMS Analytics demonstration with a little sneak peek of our latest dashboard, and finally, we'll leave a little time at the end of the presentation to answer any questions that you may have submitted. Joining me today is Jason Rolfe, Director of Sales with FSI, and Justin Ryan, Business Intelligence Specialist with Stoa. Jason has been with FSI for a little over 2.5 years thus far, but brings over 15 years of experience in the healthcare IT space. Justin comes to us from Stoa and has been in the business intelligence space for 4+ years. Justin has been working with the FSI team since 2020 and focuses on the healthcare and built environment. Finally, yours truly. I've been with FSI for a little over 5 years at this point, and I really focus on problem solving and assisting clients to achieve success within their operations. If you are new to FSI and this is your first time learning about the company, then I'll be happy to let you know that FSI provides the leading CMMS for the healthcare industry. We actually got our start as a services company back in 2002, where our teams were going on site to healthcare facilities to perform asset inventory data collections. FSI is still offering this service today, even after going to market with healthcare's leading compliance-oriented CMMS. If you're comfortable with your existing data, then no worry. FSI does offer one-to-one data conversions from legacy CMMSs as well. FSI's team consists of members from healthcare facilities, so chances are someone within FSI has been in your shoes before. This level of expertise is unmatched when it comes to assisting our customers. And if you were unaware, FSI does offer ongoing learning opportunities through multiple channels. A few of these consist of our monthly webinar series, as well as our annual user conference meeting. This upcoming user conference will be held in Charleston, South Carolina, March 13th through the 15th. Get your tickets now. And at this time, what I would like to do is hand over the mic to Justin Ryan for a look into Stoa. Justin, take it away, sir.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. Like Josh mentioned, I'm the product owner for CMS Analytics, and I work with Stoa. We're a strategy and consulting company that kind of focuses on digital solutions, and we're international, and we work with a lot of healthcare organizations. And I work specifically within the business intelligence arm to kind of partner with FSI and work on CMS Analytics and figure out how we can bring data, get value out of data as it comes to operating healthcare facilities.
Thanks, Justin. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, we will focus on common challenges in healthcare operations that could very well be impacting many of you on this webinar. How do analytics-led decisions fit in? We are all grappling with labor challenges and workforce efficiencies, and the often used term being forced to do less with less. First off, productivity. Having the ability to zero in on where time is being spent, on what, and how often. And secondly, resource allocation. Determining whether fewer or more resources should be allocated to departments and technicians, and ultimately to see where there are opportunities to save and become more efficient. Shortly, we will also be providing an overview of CMS Analytics. Our analytics tool, built in collaboration with Stoa, provides a seamlessly integrated application to visualize and analyze KPIs that matter the most to your respective teams. We will be focusing on how you can ensure your customers are satisfied with your services. With that, trending CMS customer surveys can be deployed, confirm that your team is being productive, enable labor hours to be easily documented and tracked, verify your ITN and PM program is operating efficiently. This will ultimately empower optimal regulatory compliance. Next, Justin is sharing 3 scenarios where we have put analytics to work. Justin?
And before I kind of jump into these kind of different scenarios, I want to mention that these are all our kind of out-of-the-box standard reports. So these are the kind of the first things that you start seeing when you get up and running on CMS Analytics. And these are real use cases that people have used analytics for to kind of better their facilities processes. So one of the most common use cases, or one of the most powerful things about analytics, is it allows you to use data to kind of say, things are working well at one place, at one hospital that we have, or one campus that we have, and maybe they're not maybe they're not working as well at another one. You can kind of start to use data to not only identify those, but to understand, start to ask why. Ask what processes are different here versus over here. In this scenario, this customer kind of realized that their goal scheduling was they had technicians on 8-hour shifts, but they were noticing that at one of their facilities, something was off with their data. Maybe their technicians weren't properly trained on the system, or maybe they actually weren't being as productive at the system. But it was kind of, apparently obvious that this facility kind of stood out amongst the other two. And so they used analytics, and in this case, they used our productivity report, and they filtered this down to this one segment and began kind of, this question asking process between reports where they figured out, based on this data, go to this person and start asking questions and see what makes these two scenarios different. And if you could go on to the next kind of, impact of this, is you can kind of see that once they got up and running with analytics and they started implementing these new processes, that pretty shortly thereafter, they got this kind of hospital up in line with their other hospitals. And so that's we had a question about KPI trend analyses, and we'll see more of this in a little bit with a live demo, but this is the kind of thing where you might be tracking this KPI, notice that either a hospital isn't meeting expectations, or notice that a specific trade or subgroup isn't meeting expectations, and actually see the results over time of those processes that you implement. Another example of kind of this KPI optimization is that we typically see that customers want to aim for more proactive work than reactive. So you want to be planning for more of the work you're doing in your ITM program than, having to respond to customer requests. It's a little bit easier to manage things if you can plan for them. And this customer in particular was aiming for what we see typically, which is a 60% proactive, 40% reactive. That may vary a little bit, with you based on your organization and your organization's goals. But this customer was sitting around 50-50 for each, with a little bit of their reactive kind of bumping up above that 50% mark. And again, they implemented CMS analytics in early 2020, and they started saying, can we schedule more inspections so that we identify some of these problems before they become issues? And then with that, and with asking these questions, they were able to, over time, continue implementing these processes. And it wasn't quite as an immediate jump like we saw in that last example, but it was something that they could track to over time. And you can kind of start to see that the red line here, the amount of work that they were reacting to, does start to kind of drop down closer to that 40% range, and that the blue line, which is proactive work, does kind of bump up to that 60%. And this is real data, so you see a little bit of oscillation, and it's not going to be a perfectly straight line, and some months will be better than others, but this does allow you to kind of see where you're trending and how your, improvements or changes or new processes that you're implementing are actually impacting the metrics that you're aiming for. In this scenario, this is another kind of drastic improvement that we see, but we had a customer that was working and essentially had a backlog. They implemented a lot of data over. That data included their old work orders, their old assets, and schedules that they had in a previous CMS system. And what they didn't realize was coming out of that system was that work orders were kind of piling up over time. And they kind of identified that through this backlog report. And you can combine this report with some of your, asset work reports or your status board reports to see kind of what work orders you need to work on now. You can look at your cancellations and transfers reports to see, maybe some of the work orders that are building up in this backlog. Are they maybe things that are scheduled that are duplicate work orders? Are they things that, are being scheduled and they're not being assigned to the right people? Maybe they're being transferred too often. That's slowing you down in terms of getting your work done. But regardless, you can use a report like this to kind of see what is work that's waiting to be done, and start to see, is there anything abnormal about that work that's waiting to be done? And so they started asking questions. They looked at their schedules. They, started cleaning up who these work orders automatically get assigned to and when these work orders automatically get created. And the impact of that was that you kind of see this dramatic drop off. So they noticed that they had a lot of work orders that really were either redundant work or work that didn't apply anymore. The system was still generating them and they didn't need those work orders. So they canceled those. And that's where that kind of initial, dramatic drop at the beginning came from. And then that kind of optimization of their schedules and making sure that, they're doing less with less. They're not inspecting a fire sign every month when compliance only requires them to inspect that every 3 months. And that might be something that you as you're doing that investigation, you might use some things like our ITM reliability report or, a schedule analysis report to understand what is a proper work order generation versus what is not. And again, this is all just, things that help you start to have those conversations and start to ask those questions. But you can kind of see that their backlog, again, it's real data. There's some oscillations, but it stabilizes. It gets to a healthy, they've got 6K work orders, but that's across an entire hospital network. And it's something that they can manage, and they can kind of, it's easier to respond to work when you don't have an endless growing backlog of work that you have to look at. And so when you open up analytics, so this is, this is built into CMS 4. This isn't the exact typical screen you might normally see. This is the, from our and STOA's website where we kind of manage the application. But for the most part, it would look the exact same as what you might see in CMS 4, minus having your CMS kind of command bar over here. But when you open this up, you land on a report. It might be something like the status board report. So this is the kind of thing where, some customers leave this open in a trade room, so you can kind of see what work orders are open right now, what is overdue, what is scheduled for this month that is still waiting to be completed. And you can kind of filter these things down. Maybe I want to select something like Pittsburgh facilities and just see what's open for Pittsburgh facilities, and everything kind of updates quickly. Or maybe I just want to see, a specific trade if I'm working within a specific trade room, or I just want to see my ITMs. There's different ways you can kind of break the data down, and everything's very clickable. So I might click on some of these arrows up here and it'll take me to the details of those work orders. This one's a little bit more operational, but the reports that we were just looking at were reports like the productivity report. So when I open this report, it's going to land me on a page where I'm kind of doing a labor charge analysis. And this was the report that we were looking at initially with the first case study, where they were looking at these average, craft hours per team, and seeing that on 2 of their facilities, they were looking at 8 hours per day of productive work. And on the other facility, they were looking at 4 to 5. And quickly, you kind of see, these are the different segments I have my data broken down into. They're filtered off right here, but our demo data consists of a Hendricks County facilities, a Pittsburgh facilities, a Pittsburgh ITM, and a Pittsburgh University. Some of these demo facilities where we don't update the data anymore, and that's why these lines kind of cut off. But these 2 are the main facilities that we see, and you'll see those come up in some of more of the reports that we go through. But when we land on this page, we have our KPIs. We can look at this either for the last 30 days, or we can look at, the quarter to date, last 90 days, last quarter, last year. And if we want, we can compare those numbers. So instead of 30 days, we can drop it down to something like, how did we do in the last 30 days versus the 90 days prior? And you can kind of get some percentage metrics to see how those are changing based on, maybe you're implementing new processes each quarter, or et cetera. But the goal is, ask questions, implement changes based on those questions, see how those changes impact your actual performance. And again, we can either, if I want to click and just see this one segment here, I can click, everything kind of updates, it's dynamic. If I just wanted to look at maybe, the biomedical infusion hours, then I can see, this specific trade, and your data might look a little bit different. You might have your trade set up differently. But if, let's say I'm looking at something like, this Tim Brown person's labor hours, and I'm like, 7.3 hours, he's doing really well. What kind of stuff is he working on? Maybe I want to start to ask questions about how I, apply his productivity to other people. Then I can drill down and I see the exact labor charges that he's drilled through too. I do have some questions, like one, can I set custom date filters when I look at numbers in analytics? Right now, the date filters on the reports are kind of configured to be these preset ranges. But we can discuss, if you got it up and running, we could set up custom date filters where you could say start at this date, end at this date. Some of the reports are a little bit more just historical in nature, like one that I'll get to in a second. So instead of getting these kind of comparison periods, they're more like, you select that I want to look at the last 5 months, or the last 2 years, or the last 14 days. So there's a little bit of configurability there that we can kind of extend if that's something that your organization needs. The other report that we were kind of looking at was something like the backlog report. So you might be looking at productivity and looking at backlog, and you might want to combine these 2 reports and maybe start to ask questions about, why is my backlog piling up versus, why is my backlog piling up if my users are being productive? And that may be something that maybe they're not being as productive as you would like them to be. You don't feel like you're understaffed, but maybe there's ways that you can make your technicians more efficient and get them work more consistently throughout the day. And all of those are questions that you can kind of start to ask when you start to look at the data. And just like on the last report where we could drill through to the labor hours, if I want to see the work orders that are contributing to my backlog, I can kind of click here. Maybe I want to sort by the needed by dates and see the oldest work orders.
Since you're on the backlog, there was a question regarding backlog. It says, does the backlog subcategorize into types?
Yes.
PMs?
So we have standard work order categories. So one of the things that we do when we kind of help customers get up and running is that we take their work order categories and map them to standards. We can break this down a little bit more, or do, when we work with you on your mappings, if you want something like a PM versus an RO or a type 1 PM to show up in this report, then we can make that your standard work order categories. And those are the breakdowns down here. So in our kind of demo data, we have this broken down into things like facilities activity, customer requests, risk mitigation, and all of those. It's just like in the other report where if I just want to quickly see the risk mitigation kind of backlog over time, I can click here and everything live updates. It's pretty flat because we're actually really, really good at managing our backlogs and, at our demo facilities. But good question. Yes, it does break down like that. And it breaks down to trade, location. There are different ways that you can configure that. If you were to get online, a customer success person from the FSI team would kind of help you configure your system in terms of your categories and your statuses and your trades in a way that's useful to you. This would be set up to work with your data and work with the way that you need things set up. Those mappings. So we have another question on how we map in analytics. And that's an effort that we go through with you and your team. Whenever you get set up on analytics, one of the first things that we do is we pull all of your data, whether that be, data that you migrated over from another system, or, maybe you've been using analytics for 2 or 3 months and you've generated a good amount of data and you've got things configured. We pull that data and we go through a mapping exercise with you and your team where we say, here's what we suggest for mappings. Do these work? These are kind of our standards. Do these standards work for you? And if not, how can we update this? And that's kind of sometimes a live process. Sometimes customers set up mappings and then, after a few months, they say, we want to change, this work order mapping to display as this in analytics. And that's an easy process and something that we can always do. But these are the kind of mappings that end up over here. So you can see that, service requests, we map to the standard category that is customer request, and that's reactive work. And that's kind of how this breaks down. So it's all a collaborative effort between us and the team. And this is just kind of the view that we were looking at with proactive versus reactive work orders. And again, just like on the other page, if you're saying, maybe I look at this and I say preventative maintenance, that's 99% of our work. That seems really off at this demo facility. I can right click here and I can drill through and see what those work orders are. And maybe it's a configuration issue. Maybe it is just that we need to clean things up a little bit. The idea is that all of the information that you need is quick and it's easy to get to here so that you can, fix that in the system or fix that in your processes. And with that, we've got 10 minutes left. And I do just want to kind of jump over into a new dashboard that just released very recently, because one of the questions that we get, I'd say most frequently when we're working with customers, and we have a customer cohort that, gives feedback on the product and tells us things they wish they could understand right now that they're not able to. And that has led to the creation of this report. And it's all around just understanding when your work is coming in so that you can kind of properly plan those resources around that work. And this report, the whole idea is just understanding, on a typical day over, however long of a time period, what does an average day for us look like? How many hours of work are we getting per day so that we can start to think, how many technicians on a given day do we need scheduled? What time is that work coming in so that we can kind of start to understand, maybe we just need one shift. Maybe we're a really, really easy hospital that can just schedule one shift of technicians from 9 to 5 p.m. Or maybe we notice that if we change this to 3 years, we have a little bit more data in the older parts of our demo database. And we can kind of start to look at this and say that maybe, 1 8-hour shift for us is not going to be enough, because we look at this graph and we see that, over the last however long of a time period that we select over here, that our work really starts coming in on average at 6 a.m. And so, maybe we have technicians scheduled on 12-hour shifts and it's one shift from 6 to 4 p.m., or maybe we start to have conversations. And if we saw different bumps, maybe we need one morning shift and one evening shift. But again, we can kind of start to look at this to start to say, how many people do we need scheduled and when do we need them scheduled in order to, better set ourselves up for them to be able to respond to that work. And we kind of have heat maps down here that, again, are just kind of showing what are the hot spots during the days of the week. Typically in our normal customer data, usually Sunday and Saturday are a little bit, cooler of days than the days in the week. But in our demo data, we do have, Tuesday and Wednesday are our weekends at our demo facility. But just like the other report, if we wanted to see kind of what work orders are contributing to this average or contributing to this hotspot, we can drill through. If I just quickly want to see, I see that some of the work over here is plumbing fixes. If I want to see what plumbing fixes are contributing to the rest of the report, it's a quick click. It updates everything. I can see I've got around 2 hours of work coming in per day. If I want to start, in our demo data, we have vendors and full-time employees and contractors set up. But this might be broken down. Some customers break it down into, they might have maintenance tech ones versus maintenance tech twos versus, they're different tiers of technicians, and they can kind of start to see, when do we need our higher level technicians scheduled? When can we, when is it best to have more junior technicians on the line? And so there's, again, different ways that you can configure your data. And that's something that we and the customer success team at FSI work with customers to kind of advise on and help you get set up in a way that's meaningful to you. This is the total amount of work coming in, but there's another way to kind of look at this, which is the workload per user. And the idea behind this page, this is just another way to look at that metric, where essentially we're taking those same looks at how many incoming hours are coming in, and then looking at how many, essentially for each technician that is getting assigned those incoming hours. We look at, for 1 hour of the day, between 10 and 11 p.m., did John Smith get 1 hour of work? So, he's able to complete 1 hour of work in 1 hour, or did he get 4 hours of work, meaning that there's no way he could complete all of that work in that time? We got 5 minutes left. I may want to jump over to Q&A.
Yeah, hey, that's not a problem at all, Justin. Thank you very much for the overview of the CMS analytics system. Really excited about the resource planning dashboard as well. So, hey, what I'd like to do now is spend a few minutes addressing some of the questions that have come across the Q&A. Hey, Jason, what questions do you have for the team here?
Yeah, there's quite a few. I'm just kind of sifting through them. We'll try to do our best to answer as many as we can live, and the rest will reply through the chat. There was one question. I'll try to get through a couple of easier ones. How far back can we go with work orders?
So typically that varies customer to customer. Typically we load in by default the previous 2 years of data. Some reports are kind of filtered by default to only show the previous 6 months, just to kind of, make sure that you're getting as fast of an experience as possible. That can be extended if you would like, but typically when it comes to implementing process changes and, shift and, team changes and things like that, those results aren't, multi-year experiences. So you don't get a lot of value, on looking at a 3-year analysis on a day-to-day basis. But all of your data is, when you stand up CMS Analytics, the FSI team has a data warehouse that comes up with it, and that stores essentially all of your data. So if you wanted a custom report that showed all of your data for the past 10 years of data that you migrated in, that's something that's possible. It's just not standard kind of by default.
Great. Another question, can this be exported to a CSV if they want to build their own dashboards?
So you could, yeah. If you wanted to export from analytics, you can export those to a CSV. If you want to, do some Excel work or do some exploration. You also, again, like I mentioned, you have access, once you purchase analytics, you also have access to a data warehouse that, these reports are pulling from that same modeling schema that we worked with the FSI team on. And so you could connect to that data warehouse and work on your reports if you would like.
Good deal. Are we able to identify redundant work orders?
Yeah, so it depends on kind of how you might want to look at that. So there's things like backlog, which you may be at backlog or ITM reliability. Backlog is going to show you things that are open that for some reason are not being closed, which that's one place you might find a redundant work order. Something like the ITM reliability, I didn't show it in the other screen, but that's where you start to look at, for each asset that I have, what work do I have scheduled on it? And so it might be something where on one asset you have, a 1 year schedule on it, but you also have a 6 month schedule on it. And what that's going to mean is you're generating duplicate work orders. So instead of looking for those redundant work orders, you might look for redundant schedules on those work orders.
Great. Another question here. Once I get up and running with CMS, what does it take to implement analytics?
Yeah. So, I mentioned kind of bits and pieces of this throughout, but once you get up and running with CMS and, we start the kind of CMS analytics kickoff process, one of the first things that happens is you get a data warehouse environment stood up. And that's, we've standardized that pretty well. That's a quick process. And then we go through a process that's typically around 1 month. Sometimes it's a little bit faster, sometimes it's slower, depending on scheduling. But that process is basically just where we work with you to, introduce you to analytics, introduce you to the metrics that we kind of give by default, and map your data. And all of that's pretty standard. So I'd say at the longest, it's typically around 1 month. But we've had, as short of implementations as 2 weeks.
Great. Thank you, Justin. I know we're up at the half-hour mark. There are definitely a few questions remaining. We'll certainly do our best to respond to those in the chat. But we do want to thank you all for coming out today. On behalf of everyone on the FSI team, we want to thank you for joining us, and we hope you saw value in the session. Should you want to take a deeper dive into value of analytics for your organization, please reach out to our team so we can schedule a follow-up one-on-one session with you. We thank you for your time today. We look forward to more conversations.